How is it going, everybody? You're watching Then About Tech, and today I'm going to show you how to save a ton of battery life in iOS 15. So now that we're all updated to the latest version of iOS, we may notice that battery life is not as good as it was in iOS 14, so that's why I'm going to give you the best tips on how you can save a ton and make your battery last much longer, okay? So first things first, and I don't want to make you waste any time, is keep your iPhone updated. This is the tip number one, and it's super important. So go to your settings and then scroll down to general and then software update and then automatic updates and leave it on. I do recommend that you do this, especially right after updating to a major new version, a major update like iOS 15 is, because it's 15.0, so it still has bugs, it's not 100% improved, so of course your battery won't be 100% right off the bat, because of course of those optimizations in the latest version. So if you keep your iPhone updated to iOS 15.0.1 or 0.2 or even 15.1, those problems with battery will get solved. So just by keeping your iPhone updated, it's a huge tip that I do recommend that you pay attention to. Tip number two has to do with live tags. And we all know live tags is one of the most important features in iOS 15. And even though it's a cool little feature where you can actually pick up any text when you want to take a photo, like in this example, in this box, I can tap on this button and then I can pick up the text very easily, and then of course I can play with it, I can copy, paste on my notes, do whatever I want actually. But the thing is, live text drains so much of your battery. It's a huge battery drainer just because your iPhone will be constantly looking for, analyzing and scanning text every single time you open up your camera app. And as you can imagine, that demands a ton of processing. It really does. So what I do recommend you to do is actually go to your settings and then scroll down, keep scrolling a bit more, and then go to your camera and then disable live tags. And don't worry, because when you disable live tags from the camera, it's literally only disabling from the camera app. So then when you take a photo and it's in your gallery, in your photo gallery, you can still use live tags there. You can still scan, copy, paste, and take a look at phone numbers and everything like that when the photo is taken. But when you're actually pointing before taking the photo, it won't be analyzing anymore. So I think it's a good way of using live tags because it won't be draining your battery so much. Now, let's head back to settings and let's talk about a feature that is super important. So scroll down, go to privacy, and then let's talk about tracking. Tracking is a relatively new feature in iOS. It was released in iOS 14.5 actually, but it's really important that we talk about because it's not only important for battery, but it's also for privacy. So what I do recommend you to do is actually turn off the first option, allow apps to request to track. So turn it off, and when you do that, you have the option to ask apps to stop tracking. That's what I recommend you to do, so tap that. So when you do that, you will be telling your iPhone that you don't want any apps to track you. And that's super important, guys, because as I said, not only for battery, because as you can imagine, when an app is tracking you, it's gathering a ton of information, picking up a ton of data from you, but also it has to do with privacy as well. Of course, you don't want apps to be tracking you, to know what you're doing on your phone, on other apps. So this is absolutely so important that you turn it off, so then you won't have your battery drained, and also you'll be much more private. Now let's talk about a tip in Safari. So every time you open up Safari and we load a page, pretty much any page on the web, we will see an ad. This ad may be at the top, it may be in the middle. It's definitely somewhere in the middle of your content, in the middle of what you're doing, you will see an ad. And as you can imagine, every single time an ad loads, it's draining your battery because it's of course gathering your information, cookies and everything like that, and of course loading the remote content. So now in iOS 15 we have the ability to actually block ads, and it's super easy, guys. So if you actually come back to settings, and as you can see, settings is a theme here, of course we're going to be doing a ton of things in settings, and then we scroll down and we actually go to Safari, we're gonna need to scroll down a bit more and go to extensions. And when we tap on extensions, as you can see here, I have an ad blocker, and this ad blocker is called Block. I have tried many others, but this one is definitely the best. So if you want to install an ad blocker on your iPhone, all you have to do is tap on more extensions and then wait for it to load, and then scroll down, and then under content blockers, look for Block, and then get. In my case, it's open because I already have it. And then as soon as you tap on get and it loads and installs, you can already come back to Safari, to your settings, and turn it on. And as easy as that, you will have an ad blocker on your iPhone, and then from now on, you won't see any ads when you're surfing the web, when you're browsing the web, or doing anything on any website. But please keep in mind that this will only work in Safari, so you gotta use Safari if you want to take advantage of this feature. Now, let's head back to settings, and then scroll down to privacy once again, and then all the way down to motion and fitness. This is very, very important, and we generally don't really pay attention to this section, but motion and fitness, especially the motion part, what it's doing is actually monitoring and tracking the motion on your iPhone. So then when your iPhone is moving, iOS will realize that you're moving as well, and then it can send this data to many different apps like Health, like Waze, and many, many others. And depending on your usage and depending on the apps you use, you don't really want your iPhone tracking your motion, because it's using your gyroscope and many different sensors to actually gather all of that information and, of course, drain your battery. So if you have apps here that you don't use or you don't want, you can easily disable motion and fitness, and that's it. You're good. You don't want to have this drainage anymore. Still here in your settings, and still here actually in privacy, so go back to privacy, let's talk about location services. This is super, super important, guys. Location services is one of the things that will drain your battery the most. I have talked about this many, many times in many different videos in the past, and I'll always repeat because this is important. It doesn't matter if you're in iOS 15, 14, 16, 17, 20, location services will always be there. So important. So of course, I won't recommend you to just turn off location services, because there are many, many apps that do require your location, and you want them to use your location. But what I want you to do is actually take a look at your apps one by one and try to change their status to while using or never, and try not to have apps using your location always. Like for example, let me look for here, like for example Waze, or in this case I believe Google Maps as well. So if you go to right here Google Maps, as you can see, it's as always, and I don't want Google Maps tracking my location always. I'll go to never. It's much better like that. I don't need it. Same thing of course with Waze. If you don't use it, put it at never, and only leave it as always applications that you do want to have your location always, like in my case weather. I do want that, otherwise never and while using. This is very, very important. On top of that, let's talk about system services as well, which is something that I always talk as well. So tap on location on system services, and you'll see that by default everything under system services will be on, will be green, and that's because your iPhone wants your location for many, many things that maybe you don't want. Like for example, Apple Pay merchant identification. Why would I want that? So turn it off. Keep going. Compass calibration, turn it off. Device management, I don't want that. Emergency calls and SOS, of course, find my iPhone as well. HomeKit, I don't have HomeKit, I don't use it. Location-based alerts. If you live in a location that you have location-based alerts, okay, it's okay to turn it on, but for me, it doesn't work really here where I live, so off. Location-based suggestions, I don't want that. Motion calibration and distance, I don't want that either. And you can keep going for setting time zone. I don't travel abroad all that often. And then framework, system customization, I don't want any of that. And even your product improvement, you can disable all of that as well, because what this is doing is pretty much your iPhone gathering information from you, especially under your location, and then sharing with themselves or with Apple or with other brands and companies to improve the iPhone. But you don't want them to use you use your location, use your privacy for that matter, and your battery to improve their own privacy, to improve their own products. Like, that's not how it should work, right? So then you can dismiss all of that, and then you have significant locations as well, which is pretty much a profile that your iPhone creates from you, and then it knows your significant location. So where you work, where's your home, where's your girlfriend's house, or anything like that. It's super creepy to have your iPhone keeping tabs on you and your location. So I do recommend you to tap on it, put your Face ID, and then turn it off completely. Another thing that is not only battery, but it's also privacy. Okay, let's head back to settings and let's talk about another thing that's not all that new, but it's as important as location services, and that is notifications. But of course, there's something new here, which is focus modes, which I'll talk in a second. So when you're talking about notifications, we're definitely talking about something that drains your battery so much, because what it's doing is all of those apps that are under notifications, they are loading in the background, gathering information to notify you, to push notify you about something. And that, of course, drains so much. So what I recommend you to do is have a look at one by one at all of these apps and only have notifications on apps that you want and that you need. Because most of the times, we just want a few apps to notify us, not all of our apps. So have a look at your apps, tap on one of those, then disable if you don't want to get notifications from this app, and then you're done. This app will not notify you anymore, and it'll save a ton of battery if you do this with a lot of applications, which is what I recommend you to do. But of course, now in iOS 15, we have the ability of pulling down the control center and working with the focus modes. So if you tap and hold, we're going to go to the focus mode screen, and then we can have multiple different customizations right here on how, when, and where we can be and we want to be notified. So in this case, I'm on Do Not Disturb, and if I tap on the three dots and on Settings, I'll go to the Do Not Disturb screen, and then I can select what apps and which people I want to notify me. So it's a cool way as well to just select a few of the apps and a few of the people that you want to notify you, and then you have the exact same effect, but in a very easier and cooler way now in iOS 15. Still in our settings, let's scroll down and talk about screen time. And screen time is a feature that, again, wasn't introduced in iOS 15, but most people don't use. I personally don't use screen time, and I know a lot of people that doesn't either. But unless you are a father and you have a kid, or maybe you have your app limits, but again, most people don't use screen time. But the thing is, screen time is constantly tracking you. Not really tracking you, but it's gathering information from you to create all of the activity, to create graphs and information on how you're using your iPhone. And again, if you don't use screen time, there's no point of having an application just processing all of the data and all of that information every single time if you don't use it. It's such a battery drainer. So what I recommend you to do if you don't use screen time is scroll down, turn it off, turn off screen time, wait 2 seconds, and then you're done. Now let's talk about a habit. This is something that almost everyone does, and it's not really correct. I actually have a full video on this, which is opening up the app switcher and closing up all your apps. As I said, this is not a good habit. This is not something you should do. And what it does pretty much is drain your battery. So most people do this because they're cleaning the RAM. So they're thinking they're making the iPhone faster, more efficient, and not have all of that stuff in the background. But the thing is, when you close all your apps, the thing is, generally, you need to reopen them shortly. So you're going to close WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and all of that. And then 5, 10, 15 minutes later, you're going to reopen all those apps. And when you do that, it's actually going to drain your battery much, much more, having to load those apps from the top, from scratch, from zero, instead of having them freezed up in the app switcher. So trust me when I say this, iOS 15 knows much better how to manage RAM and battery than me and you, right? So don't close out your apps. Don't go ahead and do all of that. Just leave iOS do its thing. Now let's go back to settings. And of course, since this is a battery video, we have to scroll down and go to the battery section. Of course, there's no way to not take a look at this because this is the most important thing when you're talking about battery. And the first thing you need to do, of course, is go to your battery health and then enable optimized battery charging. I know a ton of people who has just disabled this feature for no reason. They think there's no point, it does no good. They think it actually makes your maximum capacity go down, but this is all fake. This is all myths. This is not true, right? So when you enable optimized battery charging, this won't really affect this cycle. It won't really affect your battery life today or tomorrow, but it will affect your battery life in the long run for the next 6 months, a year, or 2, because this will preserve your maximum capacity and not lower it, but actually preserve as much as possible. So turn this on. I do recommend it. Okay, now going back to battery, of course, we have to talk about taking a look at all your applications one by one and analyzing and seeing how's your usage, how you're actually draining your battery, and what apps are actually draining your battery the most. It can be Instagram, YouTube, music, whatever. Have a look here, because when you do this, when you actually see the numbers, you see the screen time, you see your activity. So in my case, for example, 45% of my battery is being drained by Instagram, and I can even tap on activity and I can actually see how many hours I've been using Instagram. So this is also very, very important. It is a good way to manage your usage on your iPhone. And if you have maybe bad habits for yourself and of course for your battery, pay attention, and maybe this is a good way to change it. Now let's talk about something that's a little bit different from what we're talking about in this video, but it's also super important, which is heat. Pay attention to heat. Pay attention to when your iPhone gets hot. I mean physically hot, when you touch it, the sides of it, the display, and the back of it. And if it gets too hot, it's a sign that you need to take action. And that's because lithium-ion batteries, they hate heat. They're sensitive and they degrade much faster when they operate in heat. So if you use your iPhone under the direct sunlight, or if you're playing a really heavy game, intensive graphics game, and you feel your iPhone is hot, stop using it or take away from the sun and let it breathe, because heat is so bad for your battery. Now let's talk about apps. And I know it may seem a little bit weird, but yes, if you have a lot of unused apps in your iPhone, this is bad for your battery. As you can see here, I don't have a ton of apps here on my home screens, but I have a ton here in the app library, and probably more than 50% of them I don't use. And even though you may think that's a problem only for your iPhone storage, and it is, because you have a ton of apps taking up your storage for no reason, it's bad for your battery life as well. Because when you have apps, even if you don't use them, they're in the background, maybe picking up your location, processing, they're sending notifications, they're gathering information from you. So those apps in the background, they're using your processing, and of course, they are draining your battery. So go ahead, go to your app library, take a look one by one at your apps, and delete them. I know this is kind of a pain, but it's the best way to do it. And I do recommend that you delete unused apps. And of course, last but not least, go to settings, scroll down to battery, and then, if necessary, enable low power mode. Low power mode is a feature that we all know and that we all use a lot, but it's kind of a last resource feature. Not because it's gonna drain your battery, not because it's gonna lower your maximum capacity or anything like that. It is a good feature. It doesn't do you harm or anything like that, but it's a kind of a last resort. It's a very aggressive feature because it will do a lot of things on your iPhone. It will throttle the performance. It'll do so much that you shouldn't be using it all the time, because you're simply not using your iPhone as you should if you use low power mode all the time. But if even after following all of those tips, you need to use low power mode, I recommend you to use it because it's super efficient, but as I said, it's only in critical scenarios. You shouldn't be using it all the time. All right, so that's pretty much it. that's pretty much what I wanted to show you. If you like this video, please make sure to hit the like button down below. I always have a blast filming those videos. It's so useful for me, and I hope it's also useful for you. That's the whole point of filming them and uploading them to YouTube. And of course, click on the subscribe button. It helps us so much, guys. And then the bell icon to get notified whenever I post a new video. And then hit the comment box down below and tell me your feedback. And even tell me if you have more tips that I didn't show or that you think are relevant, because I always read your comments. All right, so that's pretty much it, and I'll see you in my next video as usual. Bye bye.